All right. So welcome everybody. This is Tony Bemus, and I'm typically on Sunday Morning Linux Review, uh, and I also have my own hosting business, bemushosting.com, and I'm joined with Martin Obando.
Hey Tony, how's it going?
Doing good. So Martin, you're on Geeksters all the time, and then you help out with a lot of the other Podnuts shows too, right?
Yeah, I'm on. I co-host with Mitch Heyman, Tim Bauermeister, Fred Gaines. We do Geeksters every Tuesday afternoon. Sometimes I've noticed that our schedule sometimes works right together. So I notice you guys are doing your show at the same time we're doing ours. But yeah, we do talk on Geeksters on the Podnuts network. That's where you're going to find Linux for the rest of us, Server Show, Podnuts Meetup. Oh my gosh, there's so many there. Yeah, so I co-host with those guys on the Geeksters. I also have my own business, just like you. I do a little web hosting on the side. Do my specialty is more of a managed services network and system administrator for small and mid-sized businesses in the the Pacific Northwest area, actually. So it's hard to say it's just Portland, Oregon, because next week I head into California to do a server deployment. So I'll just say Pacific
Hey,
Northwest. That way, it's just a general. It's
yeah.
a big brush.
All right, that's nice. Um, anyway, the reason that we're getting on today is because we both had similar issues with some of the websites we were working with. We both run websites on WordPress, and they both had an attack using base 64. I talked a little bit about it in episode 127 of the Sunday Morning Linux Review that I had to go through and clean it up. So I thought we'd go into a little bit of depth on what we had to do. And Martin said he had the same issue, so we decided to get together and make up this show and tell people about it.
Yeah, when I was listening to you and Mary and Matt talk about it, and you were talking about your, exploits and kind of the same thing, and I thought, oh, that rings a bell because I just went through this with another one of the providers that I provide web page for, and none of my other ones were hit, just this one, and so you're talking about what you had to do, and I thought, oh, I want to write these guys and let them know I feel their pain because I've had to go through it, and it was interesting because it felt like we had fixed the issue, and then for the longest time, nothing, and there was one last page that just kind of crumpled everything and brought it back down. So it wasn't until about, oh gosh, a week and a half ago when it felt like everything was kind of finally cleaned up.
All right, yeah. Well, it's nice to have that feeling when everything's done.
Yeah.
All right, so what I was having is my host would contact me and saying that I have some kind of security or spamming issue, and that I need to go through and fix it. So I would get in and I would look around, and they would say it's maybe it's this one file. Take a look at that, and it was my htaccess file on a couple of the sites, and I just see this garbly gunk. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. So I just blew away the whole access file and restored from an older version, and it worked. Um, and then further, they were talking about that I was having continuous problems with two or three of my sites. So I went through to check to do a little more research into it, and they said that they used a script to search for base 64. So I went through and WordPress is scripted in Java, or I'm sorry, is in PHP. So I went through and wrote a script, and that would search through all the files, and it would pull out and tell me which files had the base 64 in it. Because I actually have about 20 sites, and I didn't want to run this script against a site that didn't have any problems in case, in case it caused problems. Um, so what I did is I have two different scripts. One that would search through all my sites and all my files to see if there's any of this code, and then I had another file that would go through and strip it out. Um, and then I used a third script that would go through and rewrite all the permissions on the WordPress files so that in case one of these hacks change some of the files permissions that they can now edit the files. And so I went through and reset everything like for as in file permissions. Um, I have these 3 scripts on my website, bemushosting.com, and then on the security tab, it says WordPress hacked with base64 code. And so if we look at the first script, I'm creating a timestamp so that I can timestamp my log file. And that's where I look at my log file to see which files that it found this problem in. And then I use a grep and a specific saying base64 underscore decode, because I noticed that is every line that has this problem has that in it. Now, the way that I had to do this was it takes a little bit of human interaction. I can't just tell it to strip anything that's base64, because there are some legitimate uses for base64. It's just this problem that we're having was not legitimate. And what it was doing is the code, the base64 decode would tell PHP to decode this, what to a human eye looks like garbly-gunk, and it would then do PHP against it, and so it would actually redirect somebody coming from a Google search using Firefox, then take them over to this phishing site. And I had a few people tell me, we're having problems, getting to your site, and I couldn't figure it out because I run Chrome and I go straight to my site. So once I went through and found this, then I realized what everything had led up to it, that this was the root cause. And then when I look through the log file, I'll find it shows specific files that need, or sites that have this error or this problem. And then, so my second script I have on here is, I call it the B64 clean, and it uses find and then any PHP file, and then pipe it to xargs. With xarg is a scripting saying just execute this next command, which is sed, and sed will find and replace specific strings of command or strings as you tell it to. So sed evaluate and then replaces that eval base64, and then I have a space in there, and that's where the actual base64 code goes. I didn't want to stick or paste in the actual base64 code because I didn't want it to then start, or giving other people ideas of the exact code to use. But anyway, so you find what your string is that needs to be replaced. You paste it in there, and then it goes through and strips it out of every PHP file in your site that has it. So it was actually fairly quick. It took me about a day to go through all 20 of my sites to make sure there wasn't any more of there. I think about 6 of them was actually hacked. So which then led me to think that maybe it was a FTP login, or somebody actually hacked my shell account. So we went through and reset all the passwords for all the FTP accounts, which there's about 20 of them, one for each site, and then reset my own shell account password so that nobody, if they had the password, then they can't get in anymore. And from what I've noticed, I haven't seen any more issues. I'm actually running my check right now as we're talking to then see if there's any more, if anything has come back in the last couple weeks. So even though we both have had this base64 attack, Martin, yours came in a little bit different way, didn't it?
Yeah. So the story on mine is that I was just one of my clients. So I host about 35 sites on my website, on my server, and one of the companies had called me up and they said one of their clients had called them to let them know that every time they go to the web page, it always gets redirected to something else. And it was a Russian site for like weightlifting or some exercise equipment. It was very, it was not a legitimate site. It was a very spam centric site. And so I quickly, the first thing I do, grab my phone because I was out on the road, open up, go to their site. Nothing. Everything worked fine. So that was weird. So I went ahead and opened up my Linux box, went to their site. Nothing. Everything worked fine. And at this time, I was actually headed to a meeting with one of my resellers, or one of the resellers that I deal with for some office products in the downtown Portland Microsoft store. And so I thought, well, okay, so what a better place to check and see if I get any kind of redirect or spam than at a Microsoft store. So,
Yeah.
but before then, I remote to another server in California just to check. I've checked my local machine, my phone. I do it in the local server in California. No, doesn't change. I'm like, this is weird. So I walk in, look around, jump on a tablet, put in the web page, boom, redirects. I'm like, oh, okay. So walk over to their laptop, look around, make sure, put in the web page, boom, redirects. So all the redirecting and testing that I did was courtesy of the Microsoft Store, which I thought if it's going to infect anything, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So now that I know that it was actually legitimate, just because I could not replicate the issue, I started looking at it deeper. And after the meeting, I went ahead and I came home. I contacted, well, first off, what I did is, now I didn't write any scripts, and so I had to kind of do this manually. I got into the system, and I started looking at a page. I just grabbed a page, because they had specifically said when they reported this to me that it was this one page. And so I looked at that one page, and within WordPress, and right off the bat, I didn't do the GUI interface. I switched over to so I could see the code. Now, my code was a little bit different than yours. Mine was actually a JavaScript redirect, but it had all of this just lines and lines and lines of pages and numbers, and I can read it to you. So it started with script language equal JavaScript, and it says document.write, and then unescape, and then it was things like %3c, %21, %44, %4f, %43, %54, and it was just, it was probably, gosh, 1,000 characters of like that. Just page after page after page, just scrolling and scrolling, and then finally it ends with the script. So the first thing I did was I contacted my developer and the guy who designed the website, and I said, hey, did you put this in here? Is this legitimate? Is this from you? Not that I think he was putting a redirect in, but maybe I needed to verify where the baseline was. And he says, no, that's not me. So, okay. So I take out the page, take out that script, and go in to test it again. Redirect is no longer there. I was able to finally replicate the issue in-house. I think I turned on a VM and was able to do it that way. So I had to figure out a way to replicate the issue. So now I can at least test it. Went ahead and did that, and found out, this is the code, pulled it out, redirection stopped. I said, okay, cool. Now here's the kicker, is that this site has probably 30 pages, and every single page I had to go through manually, one by one, and look at the code, rip out this thing, save it. So I called the designer, who's a good friend of mine, and I said, hey, could you help me with this? You start at the top, I'll start at the bottom, we'll meet in the middle. And we did, and everything worked out well. I went ahead and I called my host, because this wasn't doing any spamming, so my host didn't tell me what was going on. What I had to wait, what tipped it off was, like I said, somebody else telling me that the page is doing this, that is actions that were not, it was acting like it wasn't supposed to. So I called my host, and they're a great host, and I asked them, hey, could you guys, this is what's happening, could you guys take a look at this? And they said, sure, no problem. So they ran some scans, and they said, this is what's going on. We found a couple more things, we tweaked on them, and then would you like us to reset your permissions, because probably the permissions were reset wrong. It was probably just due to an incorrect administrator password, which I don't necessarily find that, because my whenever I create passwords that are given to me by LastPass, and so it's a lot of just craziness, so those are then put in a document, and they're encrypted and stuff. So I didn't think it was that. What I really think it was probably came in from an FTP site, for them. So that was all done. They scanned it. My host scanned it, did some WordPress fixes, reset the passwords or not the passwords, but the permissions. I did go back and reset all the passwords though, and just to make sure, and everything was fine. And except for the fact that because of this, we did get blacklisted. So what this means is that, but luckily it was just the domain that was blacklisted. It wasn't everybody else on the server. So that was nice. So what's happening is then somebody would go to the site and they would say, oh, it's unsecure. And this person would go, one of their clients, because what they do, this company that I was hosting this webpage for, they sell products. They have a retail products. There's no selling of the everything on the storefront. So there's nothing like that. So I don't have to worry about that. But what they do is they list all their products. So then you could call and stuff like that. So that's where that's where that came in at. And so got it all cleaned up. Everything was working really fine except for the blacklist. I worked with the companies that were getting blacklisted, and we figured all that out, got everything squared away. Everything was going really well for about 2.5 months until last week, the week before last, when another guy was trying to get to their website, and he's using Bitdefender, and Bitdefender was blocking it. So his client on his machine goes to some corporate, I think they've got a Bitdefender box or something like that, but what was happening was Bitdefender was telling him that the site was infected. And I said, well, what page is he going to? And so we looked at it, and I pulled it up, and sure enough, the code was in there. Just one page was missed with the code. So Bitdefender blacklisted the whole site. It was all, and actually, what happened? I apologize. What happened was that he didn't go there, and he could have said Bitdefender let me, but he didn't want to. He thought that would be not a wise decision. So I contacted Bitdefender and I said, hey, the last time you guys did a scan, because there are a couple. I'm going to digress here. There are a couple web pages you can go to that will scan your computers, your websites for infections. And I will have to get them to you because I can't remember them off the top of my head. But you can go to these web pages, put in the URL, and then it will do that. One's called virustotal.com, and the other one is called it's by Securi. It's sitecheck.securi, SUCURI.net, and that's the big one. You put your website in there, you say scan it, and they'll actually scan your website for you and let you know what pages or what's happening. So that's nice.
Yeah, that site check. Actually, I have used that one. Sitecheck.securi.
Yeah,
that is really nice. And it's hard. You do just a Google search of what's out there, and you don't know what's legit or not. So it's nice hearing somebody else using the same stuff. Yeah,
it is really nice. So so I called because I scanned it with this one. It did tell me a little bit but what's nice about the site check is it'll tell you who's blacklisted you as well. So I called up Bitdefender, sent them opened a log ticket with them, and I said, hey, you scanned our site months and months and months ago. Could you go ahead and rescan it, and so that way your database is up to date? And they said, sure. They scanned it, and they came back to me, and they said, we can't unblock it at this time because this one page is having an issue. So I went to that one page, and that's how I found out that rogue code. Went to the one page, found it, cleaned it up, sent it back to them. But they have a 72-hour wait time. So you send it to them. I sent it to them originally, had to wait 3 days. Finally got it back, sent it to them again, had to wait 3 days. They did clear me. I was being blacklisted by one other French company, and I sent them an email, and they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so they unblacklisted me within minutes. It was actually pretty funny. But the site has been scanned a couple times, and we're good to go. What I did find is that there's a website out there called JS Beautifier, so BEAUTIFIER.org, that just like the base 64 stuff, I can put the JavaScript stuff in there, and it will actually tell me what it does. And sure enough, it resolved it back out and wrote it instead of all of that the code, it wrote it back out, and it was actually a redirect. It's a little web page. It has a header and a body, and this whole, so it's just a web page within a web page. Sure enough, did a redirect on it. So we're all cleaned up and ready to go, and things have been working well. And while we didn't exactly have the same code 64, base 64 code, the results were the same. We both had issues that were sending out stuff, and it was all gobbledygook and hidden behind the scenes, and we both had to fight this issue. But when I heard you and Mary and Matt talking about this, I've been there.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, while you're talking, I remembered I had been working with somebody on IRC chat, and they were giving me a little bit of info about like how theirs was doing it, and that's how I narrowed it down to being it was only Firefox and it was only a redirect from Google, like because in PHP you can check to see where you're coming from, who the referrer is, and then you can grab the your web browser identifier. So that's what I was doing, is using both of those and saying only when this happens. That way it's not so obvious that the designer is going to know right away. So that's what made it hard for me, is people were telling me, but I couldn't replicate it. But so same thing with you. You had to go through extra hoops to go through and find what it was.
Right. I mean, while it stinked, and unfortunately my client was affected by it, and I'm now smarter for it, and everything's worked out well, and everybody's back up and running and happy, and I was able to actually the one gentleman who was trying to get there who could not, I was very much in contact with him. I was very much in contact with Bitdefender, so we were all working together to get this resolved, and now he's not showing that our page is blacklisted anymore. He's able to get to where he needs to go, and my client's happy, my client's clients are happy, but it was just it was a pain, and it definitely could have gone on if it went on longer. It sat for a while and didn't even realize it, but I think if it went on longer, it would have had a bigger ripple effect throughout my whole server, and possibly even affecting other clients. So
right. All right. Well, I think that's about it. Again, if you want to see my notes on it, it's bemushosting.com, and then go to Security tab. Actually, or bemushosting.com/security will bring up all my security posts that I talk about. This along with PGP stuff also. And the scripts I used, I have right on there also. Go ahead and check those out, and then use them, and then let us know. Let us know if there's anything that helped you guys out.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on and let me talk about this and share my experiences with you.
Yeah, this is fun. Well, I guess that's it. How would we get a hold of you if you needed, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, Martin?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, like I said before, you can find me Tuesdays on Geeksters. You can email us geeksters@podnest.com. If you want to get a hold of me specifically, martin@obandocomputing.com.
All right, and I am Tony at bemushosting.com. And with the Sunday Morning Linux Review, it's smlr.us. And we actually record Saturday mornings now. It's Eastern Time at 7:30 a.m. So I think for Martin, what is it, 4 a.m. for you?
Yeah, that'd be 4:30 for me. But
right.
We'll have to see. We did do an episode of Geeksters on Memorial Day at 5:30 a.m. my time. So.
Oh wow.
So I can get up a little bit earlier, and I should sit in the chat room and give you guys some grief.
Or at that point, you might as well just stay up overnight, huh?
I could do that.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and actually, I appreciate you actually suggested us get on like this. So I think this is really going to help people. Thanks again.
Yeah. You're welcome, Tony. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.